And we're live. I'm Kwame with my good friend Kamali, and we are here to talk about some news that's going on. This is a little group thing. Some of you may check us out from Raised Fist Media. Some of you may be viewing from Radical Democracy. Welcome either way. And I'm not gonna keep you guys too long. We're gonna get right into it because we kind of got a lot to talk about. Kamali, do you want to give us some background on what exactly going on here?
Yeah, so I guess quickly, for folks who might not be familiar, but I'm assuming that if you're here, it's probably because you're familiar with who Shahid Buttar is. But he is currently running for Congress against Nancy Pelosi. I forget the exact district, but it's the San Francisco, and he won the primary, so that there's already been a primary election in California, which he won, which allowed him to actually face off against Nancy Pelosi. So in this, the way that they structure there is you can have two Democrats face off in a general election. And so in their general election, they're going to have two Democrats facing off against each other. I think it's like that throughout all of California. And they will be facing off in November in the November election. And so recently Shahid Buttar has been calling for some debates with Nancy Pelosi, which she's been avoiding, but all of a sudden, shortly after that, this news surfaced where a former staffer of I'm sorry, I don't believe it's a former staffer. Let me get that corrected. We'll pull up an article shortly, but someone that was an activist alongside Shahid Buttar, formerly lived with him in a communal group, and known him for about 20 years. This woman recently, I think it was on Tuesday, came out and publicly accused him of sexual harassment. And so there's just been some controversy spiraling around that, and some reactions from the left, including the DSA in San Francisco. And so I wanted to dig into that, kind of give our initial thoughts. It's really still very early, so to be honest, there's not anything too much definitive that we'll probably be able to talk about today, but did want to give it some early coverage and try to just sort of stake our positions on this one early, and then see how they sort of develop as information comes out, because that's how you have to do. So exactly. With that, maybe we can pull up the first article from The Intercept. So there's an article from The Intercept, and it's a 2020 article, and it's titled "Shahid Buttar's Bid to Unseat Nancy Pelosi Roiled by Accusations of Staff Mistreatment." So there's actually two parts to this, and I'm sorry that I missed that. There's actually two parts to this coming out, and they've sort of been conflated together. And so there's been accusations of staff mistreatment. So some staffers are saying that Shahid Buttar was mistreating. In particular, they say women on his campaign, saying that he was a misogynist and sexist, and that he was in particular singling out women on his campaign. And so there was some staff overturn recently, and on July 23rd, The Intercept wrote this article. So let me just read a little bit from it. The campaign of Shahid Buttar, a Democratic Socialist challenger to House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, is stumbling amid allegations of sexism and mistreatment of staff in the workplace. The allegations, which former staffers described to The Intercept, prompted the San Francisco chapter of the Democratic Socialists of America to consider a draft resolution rescinding the organization's endorsement of the candidate. Buttar's campaign has faced a period of personnel turmoil since the March 3rd Democratic primary, with at least 10 staffers and contractors departing. That includes his top three staffers: campaign manager Jasper Wild, finance director Emily Jones, and field director Otto Pippinger. Most staff on Buttar's current team started after the primary, and he no longer has a campaign manager, a change he attributed to a restructuring toward a distributed leadership model. His previous staff, he said, were resistant to empowering volunteers. All right. So, in an interview with The Intercept, Buttar denied the allegation and argued that the former employees were dressing workplace disputes in the language of harassment and discrimination. The allegations that I'm ultimately being accused of with respect to the campaign are not gender related. This is quoting Shahid Buttar here. It's a staff performance issue, he said. What has been characterized as staff turnover is ultimately staff improvement. Let me just read this one more paragraph here. So, complaints about the campaign's culture came to a head this week when 44 members of the DSA San Francisco chapter, including 3 former Buttar campaign staffers, Patrick Cochran, Raya Steyer, and Sasha Perigo, signed on to a proposed resolution to rescind their endorsement of him. The resolution cited a sexual harassment accusation from a former acquaintance, which was made public Tuesday on Medium, and which Buttar has denied, and a pattern of abuse, including but not limited to sexually inappropriate behavior with his staff and volunteers. The Intercept could not independently corroborate the accusation by the former acquaintance or the charge of sexually inappropriate behavior. So, with that, let's be clear. What they're saying there is there's some accusations here that have come out. One accusation of what they're saying was a sexual harassment accusation from a former acquaintance, which we'll get into in more detail, and then what they're calling a pattern of abuse, including but not limited to sexually inappropriate behavior with his staff and volunteers, and that the Intercept could not independently corroborate either the accusation by the former acquaintance or the charge of sexually inappropriate behavior. So they haven't been able to corroborate either of those accusations. They were able to at least corroborate these accusations of staff mistreatment. So let's be clear there. This is still, these accusations have just come out, and there's been no extensive digging into this. Now, Shahid Buttar. So let's first get into, I think, there was just to lay out all the facts here for everyone to be clear on. Do you have anything to jump in there yet on, or anything about this so far? Anything that stands out to you, or anything that you
I feel like it's a pretty good framing so far, especially as to where you would be before we dig a little bit deeper, which we're going to show you a little bit more. I feel like this is probably where anyone lightly familiar to this subject will be coming from.
Yes.
But we'll do a little bit deeper dive right now for y'all.
Okay, yep. And just if in case anyone's not familiar with The Intercept, it is a typically left-wing outfit, like what do you call them? Media organization, and so they are, generally speaking, they're on the left. So this is a left-wing, outlet that's presenting this information. So we should just be clear. These are folks who include Glenn Greenwald works here, and Ryan Grimm, who I have nothing but the utmost respect for. So definitely a media outlet that I trust. So to be fair, at least. So now, so there was what they're talking about now in reference to the former accusation of sexual harassment. So this is number, if you want to pull up number 1, the article from the former acquaintance of Shahid Buttar's. And so this is Elizabeth Croydon is her name. She's come out publicly. So I feel she's come out publicly. So I think it's fair to share her name. She released this article on Medium titled Shahid Buttar repeatedly sexually harassed me. And I'll read through a little bit of it just to kind of give an idea of the kind of accusations that she's making. And then I want to just bring in a few other folks into a few other comments into the conversation, to sort of some supporting, folks that are in support of her and some folks that disagree with her, just to kind of try to look at this from every side that we can, to be as fair as we can here. So Elizabeth Croydon goes on to say in this article, I have known Shahid Buttar for nearly 20 years. When I met Shahid in 2003, he lived in a communal home in DC, which served as a hub for freelance opportunities and activism in the arts. I'd go there to network and see other artists, despite the fact that Shahid consistently made me feel uncomfortable. Shahid repeatedly pursued me for sex. In our earliest interactions, Shahid would dance up to me at social events, brush up against me in a sexual way, and make comments about my body, including weight gain or loss. I directly and clearly rejected his advances. I physically distanced myself from him at parties, turned down invitations, informed a friend I felt uncomfortable, avoided being alone with him, and eventually stopped going to the communal home until he moved out. Shahid let me know he was sexually available to me for years. So real quick, just to sort of pause here, I just want to really make clear again, because I was a bit unclear in this initially. This is not a former staffer of Shahid Buttar's. It's a former acquaintance. They lived in a communal home, and he was not her employer. She was not a subordinate of his in any ways. He held no power over her other than that of maybe, he held no power over her. He's a brown man. This is a white woman. Let me just be clear. And so, we can talk about power of patriarchy for sure, but then we have to bring in power of race, and we know that's a situation we can definitely get into and dig into further. But let's just be clear that that power imbalance feels like a wash to me at best. And let's be real, in America, power balance, I would say, and this is just me, clearly I'm biased here, as a black man, but I'm gonna argue, and I would argue that white women hold a power over black and brown men in this country, and that's the way that the power balance swings in this country, unfortunately, because of the history of slavery in this country.
Absolutely.
So,
Absolutely.
all right, cool. So and we can, if anyone disagrees, please feel free to comment, leave a comment below. I will definitely have this debate out with anyone, and I would love to hear your thoughts on it. Try to convince me otherwise. Just want to point that out, that there's no clear power imbalance here between them, and this is a man making sexual advances towards a woman, potentially unwanted sexual advance, seemingly unwanted sexual advances. I don't know if he recognized how unwanted they were. Obviously, this is 20 years ago. In today's age, we would expect him to have an understanding now, clearly, of things like just what he's doing here. It sounds to me like he's being an asshole and a prick and a misogynist in some way. This is shitty behavior. If this is true or whatever, it's kind of shitty behavior. It's like if she's saying that she says, I directly and clearly rejected his advances. So she's saying she clearly rejected his advances. If he continued to make those advances,
Yeah.
then that is sexual harassment, and let's be clear, and that's, it's nothing that rises to the level of being criminal. It's not sexual assault or anything like that, but it is harassing, and it's shitty, and we should be better people and not be behaving like that. So that's for sure. But this is also 20 years ago. Let me just be clear, and we should, yeah. So, all right. So, one specific incident happened at Shahid's communal home. I had gone to the kitchen to get a drink when Shahid sneaked up behind me. He cornered me with his body and got so close and brushed up against my breasts. He blocked me in so I could not move away and gave me a weird smile that unnerved me. This was during the time that he was repeatedly harassing me for sex. Although he didn't say anything to me, this interaction was meant to intimidate me. He eventually let me pass. I made it very clear I was not interested, nor would I tolerate further advances, and I left the house. So she's saying that she, rejected the advances, made it clear to him. He seemingly blocked her off and brushed up against her breasts, and blocked her, and so she felt like she couldn't move away, and she made it clear that she was not interested, and he let her leave after that. Apparently, in her opinion, he allowed her to leave after that. So another instance that is intimately embarrassing and traumatic for me to talk about happened about a decade later. After a gorilla, so this is now a decade later, she's saying, so about 10 years ago. Another instance that is intimately embarrassing and traumatic for me to talk about happened about a decade later. After a guerrilla poet insurgency meeting / performance, a small group of us sat around at a table to catch up, including Shahid, One of my friends asked how long it had been since people had had sex. Others answered, these are really shitty friends in my opinion. Like, I don't
Yeah.
know why we're sexually shaming people or like trying to have conversations like this. Like, don't do this stuff. Like, this is shitty behavior, folks,
Yeah.
and we shouldn't be doing this shit. So, like, if whoever these friends are, they're really, this wasn't great, behaviors here. If what she's describing is correct. So, uh, others answered. I responded that I had been. So this is her again. This is Elizabeth Croydon writing. Others answered. I responded that I had been celibate for some years. Shahid's response shocked and embarrassed me. Oh my God, that is way too long. How can you go without sex that long? That's insane. I couldn't do it. You poor thing. It must be so hard. I told him that my celibacy was a voluntary decision because it helped me cope with surviving sexual assaults, batteries, and other misconduct. I felt degraded, nauseated, and revolted that he would mock me in front of friends who looked at me as an outspoken voice for women. Later, when the group walked back to the communal house where Shahid used to live, he said, I still can't believe you aren't getting it. Shahid turned to the woman that he was with and said, can you believe Liz has been celibate that long, honey? Oh my God. So I guess this is his girlfriend at the time. She's saying, can you believe Liz has been celibate that long, honey? Oh my God, what is wrong with you? Don't worry, Liz. We'll find someone to fuck you. Someone will do it. Someone has to fuck you, Liz. I'd do it, but I'm taken. I turned around to see Shahid smiling spitefully as he had done years ago in his kitchen, as if to taunt me for rejecting him years before. I repeated that celibacy was my choice and asked him to let it go. Once we got to the house, Shahid again started telling people that I hadn't been fucked in a long time, and asked other men if they wanted to have sex with me, saying that he had to recruit someone to do it. I reminded him I was a survivor of several sexual assaults and batteries. While ridiculing me was being framed as humorous, it never had a humorous tone. I did my best to hold my composure, but the truth is, my PTSD had been triggered. The more he taunted me, the more painful and vivid memories of the sexual assaults flooded my mind. I remember crying all night until my eyes were swollen because of the contempt and degradation I was shown in front of other women. Uh, she goes on to say, based on my personal experiences and many others not detailed, Shahid Buttar is not trustworthy or deserving of holding elected office. I'm compelled to share my history about Shahid, as he may have harassed other women and may continue this behavior as a congressman if elected. Like many survivors, I felt terrified for my safety because speaking out against powerful men is dangerous. By coming forward, I hope to show others they can do the same. I remain in constant solidarity with survivors of all genders and holding abusers accountable for their actions. This only makes our community and movement stronger. I'm going to read her whole damn article for everyone here. So, we on the left must hold ourselves to a higher standard, as we are committed to creating a just and equitable world free from sexual misconduct, misogyny, and bullying. After much contemplation, I made the decision to come forward about my experiences with Shahid because I cannot accept the rape culture which permeates every political ideology, including the left. Men who consider themselves progressive or radical need to take responsibility for the sexual misconduct and misogyny within our communities. We can find the strength and courage to put candidates forward of the highest quality and trustworthy substance. If we as a movement will not stand with the most vulnerable in our society, we are not who we claim we are. I hope that by coming forward, progressives across America will think twice before investing their time, donations, and trust in a candidate that has a long history of sexual harassment. The left can do better than Shahid Buttar. Okay, so that's the complete article, the complete statement from Elizabeth Croydon. And so if we could, any quick things jump out to you right now about that? Anything?
It's it's messy. I think a key thing, like you said, and again, I always, you don't want to err on the side of caution here, because I never want to sound like I am excusing I'm excusing any type of behavior or anything like that. But there is, definitely something to be said about, uh, I guess, kind of the timing, because things like certain behaviors are never acceptable. Period. Continuing to advance after someone rejects you is never acceptable, and that is harassment. But we do have to take context of understanding that there were things that were socially not known, like certain things like consent wasn't known to the degree it was today 20 years ago. So there's certain things like context does matter, and that's not always an excuse, but it is something that we do kind of have to have a little bit of understanding of. If that happened last week, that's a very different thing.
Yeah.
An entirely different thing. And I do think that is something worth keeping in mind a little bit as we continue to kind of unpack this whole thing.
Yeah, yeah, I think those are good points. So let's just get through a little bit more of the details of this story, and then we can really dive into our just our initial thoughts, reactions, and just dive deeper on that. So I'd like to go to Shahid's response. So he posted a response on Twitter, and I believe this is number 3, Kwame. I'm
Number
sorry, 2.
three, two. Sorry about that. I dropped for a second, so we're gonna go to his response on Twitter.
Yeah. So Shahid Buttar did respond to this accusation. He responded on July 21st. So that was Tuesday, July 21st, which means he responded immediately following this accusation, pretty much, shortly following this accusation. And this is what he responded with. So, a former acquaintance recently provided a statement on Twitter regarding sexual harassment. These claims are false. Every survivor must be heard, and I hope to be allowed the same opportunity to be heard as well. Sexual harassment is despicable. Those who exploit structural sexism and power imbalances must be exposed. I am committed to putting survivors' interests first before my own. These claims have been amplified by former staff who have conflated our campaign's attempts to manage concerns with their performance with gender-based discrimination. This discussion has moved into local organizations which are looking into the matter. I invite their examination of these claims, and our campaign welcomes any scrutiny. Okay, so I think that, right out of the gate, he did come and give an immediate response. A lot of this story and how I'll end up relating it is probably going to relate a lot to two situations, probably the Elizabeth Warren Bernie, the whole secret sexist thing, and as well as Bernie's a secret sexist accusation from Elizabeth Warren, as well as the Joe Biden Tara Reade accusations, which I had some very strong opinions about, and I want to make sure that I remain consistent as best I can.
Yeah.
I want to try to be consistent on this, and so I think that we'll draw some parallels, or I'll be drawing some parallels between those situations. And right out of the gate, just in comparing that, Joe Biden let these allegations from Tara Reade hang out there for months and had no response, didn't give her, didn't feel the need to treat her with even so much as give her the respect of giving her a response, and just tried to pretty much ignore after having already tried to suppress her story. So there are no signs of, and that was done through essentially, and that might not have been directly through the Biden campaign, but there were certainly other instances of the Biden campaign being heavy-handed with journalists and getting the language of a New York Times article rewritten so that they removed a part of an article that said that Joe Biden, I think they said that, they just mentioned that he had past accusations of being too touchy with people, and his campaign reached out to the New York Times and got that sentence removed from the article without even making a correction. So a formal correction. So this is very different in that sense, and I think that Shahid also did what he could to still try to keep the focus and to say what needs to be said, in that survivors deserve to be heard, and this accuser is no different, in that she also deserves to be heard, but that he emphatically denies this. And now so that was the statement from Shahid. Really, that I don't know that he's said much more on it since then. I think he spoke about it in an interview that the Intercept had, and we could possibly pop over that and do that, but and talk more about that. But I think really quickly, just to show a couple more tweets that were out there that I found that I just think that were worth highlighting. There's one from the former campaign manager of Shahid Buttar, who was mentioned in this story, Jasper Wild. In the Intercept story, she was mentioned as the former campaign manager that Shahid Buttar let go after the primary because what he says was the feeling that those staffers did not feel aligned with his strategy on empowering volunteers, and so he wanted to have a more decentralized leadership. And so this is from Jasper Wild, and just give Kwame a sec to pull that up.
Give me 1 second here. Sorry, y'all.
Nope. And if anyone, please, if you have any comments, please drop your comments below or wherever. And,
The Jasper Wilds one, is that 48 Hills article?
no, sorry. You know what? I may have. That might have. That's. Let me see. Hold on 1 second. Sorry. Sorry for the little hiccup there. It's number 6.
Number 6. All right, cool. I may have lost that.
Okay.
Because my chat dropped out.
All right, I'll just read the tweet. This is from his former campaign manager, and it's a woman by the name of Jasper Wild. She goes by @socialist_queer on Twitter, and she says that abusing power to her, and this she tweeted out on today, July 24th, and she said, abusing power to harass and degrade women is the antithesis of feminism. The first step in accountability is taking ownership of the harm. At E. Croydon, which is Elizabeth Croydon, donors, volunteers, former staff, and I deserve an apology. Then hashtag stop tweeting Shahid, and then signs it former Shahid for Change campaign manager. She says, I have been released of the non-disparagement clause in my contract, and I will be releasing a more complete statement in the coming days. So one thing I want to highlight here is just that, staffers came out, and this is in the Intercept article. They actually talk about this, how staffers had come out, said that Shahid's campaign made them sign non-disclosure agreements and non-disparagement agreements. And he was asked about that in an interview. They said that he denied it, but as soon as the first time he was asked about it in an interview, from what I can tell, he said yes, they were under that kind of agreement, but he pretty much almost immediately released them from that agreement to say, you can say what you want, because that was not what the purpose of these agreements for him clearly are not about using. And I'm very familiar with these non-disparagement agreements, because that is something that is used by employers to wield power over workers, so that when they fire you for terrible reasons, or anything like that, or there's issues inside of the workplace, that they can use those clauses to essentially threaten you with lawsuits, and to just generally have a chilling effect on people from speaking out because of the threat of a lawsuit. And so people are not allowed to say bad things about the company, although many non-disparagement agreements and most of these contracts, and many of these contracts, the non-disparagement agreements are one-sided non-disparagement agreements. Some of them have two-sided non-disparagement agreements to say, I can't say anything bad about you, and also the company, I can't say anything bad about the company, and also the company can't say anything bad about me. But a lot of these, and most of them, I would contend, say are only one-sided, and simply say that the employee cannot disparage the company, and so they can say anything disparaging they want about you. You just can't disparage them. And so I'm currently technically under those agreements, where it's had a chilling effect on me as someone that's been fired from multiple workplaces because of speaking out against systemic racism, sexism, and just speaking in favor, speaking out for things like, and advocating for things like democracy in the workplace, and calling out neoliberal ideologies for what they are. And so I've been fired for those reasons, and had to deal with these sorts of non-disparagement clauses. And so the fact that he released her from a non-disparagement clause says a lot to me about him. And one, just the fact that he's not trying to use power over these people, and he's trying to right the wrongs of these sorts of power imbalances that come through these systemic things like non-disparagement agreements. And by releasing them from that, it shows to me that on his part, that he's not trying to use power structures in a sexist, misogynist way. He's not using patriarchy and those sorts of tools to disadvantage these women. He's saying you can speak, you deserve the right to speak, and I'm going to let you speak. And so I'm not going to try to prevent you from speaking in any way. And so I think that says a lot to me too, the fact that he's said that he's willing to participate in all these investigations, and that he's released these people from their non-disparagement agreements, to me are things that should be taken note of. So the last thing that I want to highlight before I go into this is just somebody that I respect who's weighed in on this. This is the only person I could find that weighed in one way or the other. And also, so I'll also, through this, I'll also read a letter. So if you want to pull up the Katie Halper tweet.
Got you.
There's Katie actually links to in that tweet. If you just want to pull up that letter first. So Katie Halper tweeted out, and I'll just say I'll actually say what Katie Halper tweeted out, and then we can read the letter that she was referring to here. Actually, yeah. Keep that letter up. That's perfect. Keep that letter up. So first, I just want to read this letter. So yesterday, a group of people released a letter. These are people that have worked with or known Shahid Buttar for an extended period of time, and some of them whom overlapped with who knew both Shahid and Elizabeth Croydon. And so this is a letter from some of those people, and I'm just going to read the letter, and then it's signed by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 people, some of who, and I'll tell you, some who would have a personal, reason, and some bias in this. They're all going to be biased. Everyone's biased in one direction or another. But they would have some bias towards Shahid, of course. These are people that have known him for a long time, but also, so they felt compelled to. This was not, let me be clear, this letter was not organized by Shahid Buttar's campaign. He had no say in this. This was completely organized by the people who were writing the letter. They've come out and made that clear. And so this is just something that they felt compelled to do. So they say, we, the undersigned, wish to express our complete support for Shahid Buttar regarding all aspects of his character, integrity, and leadership. We specifically wish to vouch for his high ethical standards and behavior. Collectively, our experiences with Shahid range from the personal to the political, in settings including our homes, workplaces, and the streets. In each of these places, we have witnessed and interacted with a man who embodies the values he espouses, deeply respects women, and listens carefully to all those around him. Shahid's empathetic approach to connecting with others and his inherent kindness define who he is and how he supports himself in all parts of his life. We also know him as a committed feminist who fights for women's rights and against patriarchy. Recent allegations have attempted to draw a different picture of Shahid than the one we know to be true. We believe these allegations are false and ill-intentioned. The accuser is well known in the DC social justice community. Unfortunately, this troubled individual has a long history of fabricating attacks against innocent people. A review of litigation she has filed in various jurisdictions would likely yield a revealing picture to an enterprising journalist. She has engaged in late-night phone harassment campaigns, false allegations, and physical threats against numerous individuals over the years. She is not a credible witness against this promising progressive leader. We are discouraged by the speed Shahid was condemned without evidence and urge further investigation into these claims, which come from an individual with a widely known pattern of making false accusations. Shahid stands for peace, justice, and democracy. He embodies an anti-oppression principles and has a demonstrated record of practices that promote equity and inclusion. His disposition, intellect, and values combine to make up the type of person we should all hope to represent us as an elected official. Signed, and then a list of names of people that have signed it. I think one of the signatories is Margaret Flowers. She is a Green Party member who ran for Senate in, I forget which state, I apologize, but it's the same state that Elizabeth Croydon is from, and her husband, Elizabeth Croydon, accused her husband of sexual harassment as well, and that case was taken to court. That case was taken to court. I think because Elizabeth Croydon may have been an employee of her campaign or something like that. I apologize, I don't have that specific information, but that was taken to court and it was thrown out within 1 day by the judge, who saw it as not credible. Now, that doesn't mean everything. I mean, judges and the criminal justice system does terrible things to victims of abuse all the time, and so that's not on its own anything, but I just want to bring all the facts together and into this that I can before weighing in really, but any further. But Kevin Zeese was her husband, who's also signed this, and other people here. I think Martin Zundmanis is somebody that lived with them in the communal space, and Fawn Demetrio, she came out and wrote her own, I think, Medium article, or she made her own statement, which I'll try to find, but in support of Shahid Buttar as well. So people have come out. I have one other article, but I won't jump into that just yet. It's just about pretty much what I consider. It appears to be just a smear job of Shahid Buttar. So what I wanted to talk about is just what. Oh, sorry, I didn't read the rest of Katie Halper's tweet. Let me just read that off real quick. So what Katie Halper said herself. So that was just the letter. What Katie Halper said was, "I've been a supporter of Shahid for change. So I've been a supporter of Shahid Buttar since learning about his campaign. And while I hope the allegations weren't true, I was prepared to publicly rescind my support. So I looked into the story, saw the letter below, spoke to people, and I remain a supporter. My position," she goes on to say, "my position is consistent with the principles I've espoused in the past and continue to hold. To be clear, though, I of course think Buttar's platform and policies are infinitely better than Pelosi's. My support of him is not based on a political calculation that allows for harassment. It's based on looking into the story, the fact that the campaign has not said or done anything which in any way disparages the accuser, has not done anything behind the scenes to coordinate a response. His supporters have taken this on themselves. Of course, his accuser has the right to make her accusations, and I'm glad people have listened to her story and taken it seriously. Of course, people are already and will continue to accuse me of hypocrisy because I gave Tara Reid the platform of my show to tell her story. The media took as much time to drag its feet on the story. In this case, the accuser had her story reported on and was listened to. Tara wasn't. As for the people who accuse me of setting back the Me Too movement because I didn't do due diligence, they need to condemn the New York Times and every single outlet and journalist who reported on Christine Blasey Ford within a few days without interviewing her landlords or reviewing all her financial statements." That's referencing the fact that they did that to Tara Reid. And so they gave Tara Reid the opposite treatment, and they didn't write about her within days. And then when they eventually did write about her, they interviewed her freaking landlords, because we all know landlords are great, character references for everybody.
Always.
Yeah. Sick. So,
oh boy.
She goes on to say, and they certainly need to condemn every single outlet and journalist who reported on Julie Swetnick. They of course haven't, because it was never about this for them. There are journalists I respect and admire who are uncomfortable with the way Me Too stories are reported on. It's complicated for sure. I disagree with them, but they're not hypocrites. I'm referring to the people who couldn't deal with the story, so pretended to give a shit about Tara in a way that was totally disingenuous and infantilizing. This is why I respect the people who said, I don't know if Biden did it or he probably did it, but this election is too important and the other guy faces more allegations and is a monster. So, and to clarify, could more come out, which makes it so I rescind my support of Buttar? Of course. That's the point. I like his politics, but we can't just assume something is beyond someone. Mm-hmm. And I think she just goes on one last thing she says that I said this later in the thread, but it's important that people see it. I'm not saying that Shahid or anyone is beyond this behavior. I'm not saying that my support will be unwavering. I'm saying that for me, it's premature to drop my support of him. Okay, so I'm intrigued too to just read one other thing that I just saw. I just saw a response from one of the people that was mentioned in the Intercept article, Sasha Perigo, that was a former staffer, and she says, Katie, as one of the former staffers who struggled to come forward about mistreatment on the campaign, this hurts. It feels like you didn't consider us or our feelings before writing this letter. You can believe Shahid is a good man who still has the capacity to hurt people. this person doesn't realize that, for one, Katie Halper didn't write the letter. She didn't write that letter. If they're talking about Katie Halper's response, I think she was very clear in her response, and it's saying that, if more comes out and something, that she feels is credible comes out, that she will certainly be open to changing her mind on this, but that she's, as it is right now and as it stands, she can't. It's not enough for her to rescind her support for somebody who is on the issues, let's be clear, is 1,000,000 times better, not just for, everyday people, but specifically for women. Medicare for all, that's going to disproportionately impact women, and particularly women of color, and have disproportionately positive impacts for them. And so just his platform is entirely, everything about it. I don't want to be that generalizing, but you can see some of the in the graphic that we had up initially, just what some of their positions are between Shahid Buttar and Nancy Pelosi, and you'll see. I mean, go down the list, and Shahid Buttar supports all of the sort of left wing. On this is that I agree with Katie that for one, when I first read this, it made me mad, because I get upset with this stuff, because when it's just like we do this thing on the left, I feel like, where we just do like circular firing squads or whatever they're called, or like where we just like we're so quick to just at the least little sign of something, without any sort of due process taking place, we're just like, oh no, that person is trash, and we're done with them. And already you got people, like rescinding endorsements. One of the some mayor, some around in that area, or San Francisco or something, rescinded their endorsement. Some local politician in San Francisco, I believe, rescinded their endorsement already of him, and a lot of other groups are looking into it, which I think is a much fairer process, which is like, that's a fair process, look into it and democratically, decide. But democracy requires like a well-informed public. And so you got to become well-informed on the issue. Like, I don't just want a bunch of people voting on something that are uninformed people. Like, I want people to get informed, do what we just did essentially, and going through all the facts of this story and try to formulate your own opinion here on it, and try to make sure that you then test that opinion that you formulated against your ideology, to make sure that it's consistent with whatever your ideology is. And so I came down hard on Joe Biden for the Tara Reade situation, and I think that was a very different situation. And so I don't think that this is inconsistent to come down hard on Joe Biden in that situation, and in saying that the accusations with Biden are, for one, much more credible. You look at the credibility of the accuser and the accused in these situations, because that's largely all we have to go off of. For most of these cases, they're he said, she said, things. They're it's all based on like hearsay, because there's very rarely is there like video or documented evidence of this stuff. It's always verbal between two people, that's usually in private. Now, in this situation, she's pointed out a lot of Elizabeth Croydon pointed out at least one or two scenarios where there should be other witnesses who should remember something like that. Now, I will say that usually when you're the person that is experiencing some sort of form of harassment or something like that, it's going to stand out way more to you in your mind than it's going to stand out to other people. So like, if the other people weren't offended by his statements, like, it's totally plausible in that she did experience that. It really happened, in that everybody that was there would say no, that they don't have any recollection of that, because maybe it wasn't as like, it didn't stand out to them. They weren't offended by it, whatever the case is. Now, that would really blow my mind, that these people that are supposedly leftists and stuff, like, nobody's offended by that kind of fucking language. And like, I don't even care if it's even 20 years ago. Like, that's way off base. Like that.
And if you're not offended by it back then, at this point, you're probably like, I have stuff that I said whatever 10 years ago when I was younger that I look back on now and I think, and I'm like, I was wrong on that. So like, especially with all of this coming to light, someone should at least kind of like, I don't know. That's especially in a party situation or like a gathering or like with a large group of people. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, to me that just seems like, oh, and I'm gonna
I think that one thing that we definitely need to always kind of keep in mind is, we operate from a standpoint of believe women, and that is part of the Me Too movement. That's something that we do, but there is nuance there, of course, because it's believe women, and we say that because they were never believed before. That doesn't mean 100% believe them without evidence, without checking any facts, just out of hand, automatically arrest someone because someone makes an accusation. It means you take the accusation seriously. You do the due diligence of investigating it properly and fairly, making sure that their voices are heard, and that's what we mean. But that key part there is still the investigation.
Yes, absolutely. And we have to be consistent about that on the left, because like we can't just have like the ability for anybody to just, that's not a fair process, and we want fair processes on the left. We want to make sure that there's justice, and that if somebody did something, they deserve to, face the consequences of that. If they didn't, they don't deserve to face consequences for something that they didn't do. And so we need to be fair in doing that, or else we're gonna, be uh punishing people that don't deserve that. And so we definitely need to have some concept of like, okay, well, this deserves to be at least vetted by, at the very least, journalists. It should, like in
Yeah,
the case of like Congress and president, like I feel like, you know, I'm not I can't advocate for like the FBI. Like I'm not going to say
yeah,
do it, but it's like, but like you would think that there would be a third party organization that would
mhm,
investigate these sorts of things, because they're so high profile that they deserve investigation into that stuff. And so I wish that there were some sort of community based third party, independent organization that would investigate these sorts of claims. But I think that uh, it does, it certainly, we gotta have some fair process. Otherwise people can just, anybody has the power. We're now giving anybody the power to wield that. When we talk about power on the left, well, that is an immense power, to have the power to destroy someone's career and reputation by literally just saying a set of words. We have to be very careful, because we on the left talk about power all the time in our relationship with, trying to dismantle these institutions of power, and we can't replace them with other dangerous things, like allowing people to wield that sort of power over any individual. That's why you have to have fair processes, like the due
absolutely.
process to be carried out. And in the cases where it's not like it has to be like, it's not a criminal investigation. We just want to know the basic, like give us the basic details of all this stuff, and then really come out with what really happened here. And two things are being conflated here that really need to be separated out, because there are two very different things going on here that have to be separated out, which is the sexual harassment being one, and
Yeah,
so, allegedly there's some allegations here of like sexual inappropriate, being sexually inappropriate on the campaign. Now, I don't think that those things. Now, personally, like again, being sexually inappropriate, making cracking really like jokes that make people uncomfortable and stuff like that. I don't necessarily, that to me is like that shitty behavior that we should call out. That we should
yeah,
say you do better than that, because that's shitty and you're making people feel uncomfortable. That sort of thing. If that's the case, like that's the kind of thing. I don't think that it ends somebody's thing. I think it's a thing that we just have to work on, teaching people, you do better. It will damage your campaign if that's true, and you're doing that. It should damage your campaign if that's
yeah,
really going on and stuff, and that's fine. Do I think that it's like a disqualifying thing? No. Like I didn't think it was disqualifying even when friggin' Amy Klobuchar was like, apparently she was like physically assaulting like her thing, but she was really mean at the very least to her staff, and I didn't think it was disqualifying. I just thought it was terrible. I was just like, that makes her a terrible, awful person, and she definitely won't be having my vote for treating
yeah.
people like that. But like I didn't think it was like a disqualifying thing out of the gate, where it's like, oh, this person has to be like completely shunned. And so yeah, and especially now when you weigh that against policy now, because my thing is like, now what are we talking about? Because like this isn't like in a vacuum. Like this person is running a campaign against an actual person, and it's a very specific person, Nancy Pelosi, who holds an immense amount of power in Congress, and the power that she's using to wield is doing things like keeping people from getting things like Medicare for all, a Green New Deal. You know, she called it the Green New Dream, and she says, you know, Medicare for all will never happen. And it's a proud capitalist who, you know, had all the ability to pass like a single payer healthcare when Obama was in power, and she was the Speaker of the House and did nothing, and you know, and then rest on their laurels of like Obamacare as if it's some great achievement. And so I think that we have to also take that into account. What is the impact on actual? If this is we're talking about misogyny here and sexism, right? Then what is the actual impact on women of either one of those outcomes, right? What's the impact for women if Nancy Pelosi wins? What's the impact of women for women if Shahid Buttar wins? And I think that based on his policies, I will easily argue that his policies are better across the board for women than her policies, and that his policies will literally save women's lives, will
Yeah.
literally save thousands of women's lives every single year. By enacting Medicare for all, 40,000 people die every year from being uninsured. Half of those, you know, are women. That you you're talking about 20,000 women per year dying because of Nancy Pelosi's policies. Don't tell me that, you know, don't come at me with like somebody cracks, you know, really shitty, you know, shitty in the sense not funny, but like shitty because the shitty behavior, jokes and stuff like that, or like says sexually inappropriate stuff. Like that is one thing. Sexually harassing somebody is another thing. Like
Yeah.
it's one thing to say let's be clear, saying sexually inappropriate stuff doesn't mean you're sexually harassing someone either, right? It's like
Mm-hmm.
you're saying shit that might be making people feel uncomfortable, maybe, but it sounds to me like when you say sexually inappropriate, that is very specific language, which to me sounds like it did not rise to the level of even sexual harassment. It's like somebody saying like talking about sex too much, and that shit makes me uncomfortable too, like in
Yeah.
certain, you know, scenarios. And like I don't want like, and like I it's
There's a big difference here uh, between the two. Talking about your sexual escapades at work should get you a talking to. Hey man, chill out. No one wants to hear about last night's conquest. You get a talking to. Uh, Sexually propositioning someone against their will often, withholding promotions with sex, sexual harassment, things like that. That's a big difference than having sexually inappropriate conversation. Not to, you know, diminish from the fact that it's uncomfortable and bad, but again, there are levels to this, and like we do have to, you know, kind of call that out. And this has been something I've seen people have struggled to do, is notice the nuances and the levels to things, especially around Me Too. And it is a very hard and complicated thing. But even when you look back to the incident of like Aziz Ansari and what happened with that, and like a Louis C.K. or a Harvey Weinstein, even to go to a more extreme. And we can't just act like those three people are all the exact same, because there's not, you know, like there are levels to this stuff, and like we have to take into context, because that also handles how we handle that, how we approach people, how we seek restorative justice. Is it a difference of you stepping away and educating yourself more? Is it a difference of a like a Harvey Weinstein, where we can't have you in any amount of power because you're going to hurt and abuse people with it? It is, there's too much nuance there for us to act like it's all a one touch approach for all
yeah,
of us.
yeah, I agree. There's definitely got to be, we got to have degrees of this and have some nuance when we talk about this stuff, and you know, have some sort of have a proportionate response to the offenses that happen, right? So
Yes.
like if this were, you know, if this were accusations of like sexual assault or anything, I would be way more cautious, because even if it didn't pass the smell test like this or anything like that, like I'd be way more cautious, because I'm like that, you know, I want to really make sure. But like what we're talking about here is does not even rise to the level of sexual assault. It's, at worst he's being accused of sexual harassment, not to a subordinate or anyone that was in beneath him in power. Is from the accusation that I'm seeing. I haven't seen, Intercept said they were unable to corroborate any of this general talk of sexually inappropriate behavior. Haven't been able to corroborate that with anyone yet. So for now, I can't even, give any credence to that. But like the, you know, at worst here, we're talking about sexual harassment with a person who he didn't hold any sort of, worker or workplace power over or anything like that. This was not a subordinate of his. And so that also matters to me because it's not like this is like a glaring case of like, oh, this is a person who sexually harasses those that are in subordinate levels to him. Those are people that I particularly want to be really like super like the most cautious of, like people who are sexually harassing, even people that like not doesn't even have to rise to assault, but even if you're sexually harassing people that are like subordinate to you or whatever, that's a troublesome pattern to even be taking up right there, because you definitely take a hit in my book and like you lose some credibility there. And so I definitely think like what that degree is should, we got to constantly like keep that in mind, that that's the degree that we're talking about here, is that he made some sexually inappropriate jokes to a woman who was an active comedian, a stand-up comedian who made her own, like, I'm not trying to be like, oh, well, she said it, I don't want to be that, but like there's a video of her, doing like raunchy sort of comedy and stuff. And so like, and this is like, so like, talking about she doesn't want a politically correct person, she wants a politically erect person, and just make it and call about some spicy bitches, and like, again, I'm just saying that if you're not the kind of person that's like, had like very sensitive with language and stuff, then I even, if you're a friend of this person, you may think to a degree that this person is like the kind of person you can joke with, like that, like kind of thing. And maybe he was wrong. And if she says she made it clear, and like those things are just like, that's subjective stuff there. She says she made it clear. I don't know, like if she knew, if she straight up told him like, hey, listen, you're making me uncomfortable and blah blah blah, then that's one thing. And like, but there's also the fact that we have to weigh that people are coming out and saying that she may have a history of making false accusations. We got to weigh this to a person's credibility. There was nothing before this that suggests that Shahid was a dishonest person. Everything that he's done up to this point has seemed, like Katie Halper pointed out, like the dude said, he welcomes any investigation into it or whatever. He said he would fully participate in any investigation. He said that to the Intercept, and then he released them from their non-disparagement agreements. And so that's saying like, no, you can go disparage me. You are legally authorized to disparage me, say whatever you want or whatever. And he's releasing these people. And so I wanted to sort of tease that apart, which was that the other thing is this separate thing that's being conflated with this about like the staffer mistreatment, which is like, again, a thing where I'm like, okay, maybe there's some mismanagement on his campaign. He definitely came out. So he came out and he actually admitted to like that he may have, been too like harsh to people, and he may have been like inconsiderate to people and stuff like that because he's feels like he's under a lot of stress. I would argue that maybe running a campaign against, the most powerful, person in Congress could, be a stressful, thing to be doing, and that maybe we should recognize that too, in the amount of, what we're asking these people to put on their own like shoulders and burden with, and then recognize these things and try to avoid these sort of issues in the future, because I do think that campaigns are high stress environments where things like that, tensions are going to be running high, excitement, and you got these ups and downs of like polling and all that sort of stuff. And so I think that that's a very high intensity environment that we should be wary of and just acknowledge. But like, he did come out, and apparently, and this is something that I should have given you a link to this or whatever, to like, I wish I had something up, which I don't know if I still have up, that I would love to go run through. But it was essentially something that he had come out, and they said that there was an email of his and I think this might be in the Intercept article. I'm going to try to find this in the Intercept article. Um, in that Intercept article, if you want to pull the Intercept article back up, feel free. In that article, they also talked to a former male staffer there who claims, who, you know, I think quit in solidarity with the campaign manager, I believe, and says that Patrick Cochran, a former volunteer coordinator for Buttar's campaign and DSA San Francisco member who signed the proposed resolution, joined the campaign on January 15th, left May 15th, citing Jasper and Emily being treated like shit. He told The Intercept. Also, I just thought the campaign was directionless and Shahid was not a viable candidate. He said something in the campaign was off. As a male staffer, I felt like I never was treated bad by Shahid, Cochran said. He treated Jasper and Emily terribly. Excuse me. He goes on to say there was obviously a huge gulf of difference between my interactions and their interactions, which led me to believe he was misogynistic. He said, referencing Wild and Jones. We had a weekly meeting, and it was pretty frequent for Shahid to kind of belittle or brush aside any points they made, and especially Emily. It would get into really uncomfortable and just downright misogynistic and just mean how he would treat Emily when she brought up a point in our meetings. He says he's tried to use the defense, I'm a tough boss, which is completely not true. There are demanding bosses that are like that. It wasn't like that, he said, because if he was a tough boss, he would have been tough to me. He goes on to say, we always thought he was just doing this for his own personal profile, Cochran said. If you're going to attack Nancy Pelosi for her freezer and her ice cream, he said, you better make sure your house is clean too. I just want to point out the how ludicrous I find that reference to be. Like, if you're gonna attack Nancy Pelosi for her freezer and ice cream, you better make sure your house is clean too, right?
So did the ice cream explode in the freezer and now it's messy? I need you to workshop this analogy for me, buddy. Because
in the reference, if it's referencing it as like what it should be referencing, like it's like the attack on Nancy Pelosi that Shahid Buttar did was because it was out of touch, because at a time in the midst of a global pandemic when so many millions of working class people were suffering, she was out there in a Marie Antoinette moment of the let them eat cake sort of moment. They were calling her Nancy Antoinette when she did this, because she was off there showing off all her chocolate ice cream, and when the rest of people are suffering and she's on vacation while not giving any sort of stimulus, giving a $1,200 check, and then they ran off to vacation for 30 days, while the rest of the people were sitting there suffering. And so
dying.
Yeah, exactly. And dying, on the path to 145,000 Americans dying from this virus, and they're sitting on their hands and eating chocolate ice cream with her two $25,000 fridges. So it was an extreme out of touch moment, because it highlighted the wealth inequality that Nancy Pelosi experiences as a millionaire, a multimillionaire, one of the wealthiest members of Congress. And so that was what that moment was about. He says, and so if you're gonna attack Nancy Pelosi for her freezer and her ice cream, he says you better make sure that your house is clean too, since that's a completely non sequitur sort of thing there, then I have to assume that what he's saying is the only thing that would make sense is that you're saying, well, you got to make sure that you're not doing the same thing that you're accusing Nancy Pelosi of. Well, what the hell is he talking about? Nothing that Shahid has done is hypocritical in the sense of like, working class, like being out of touch with working class peoples, or economically insecure, or even hypocritical in that sense, So, that was just a really weird one. So, because he's not
especially wait. Time out. Because there's one also minor key thing here to adding to the further that this is a completely bonkers statement. When did that happen? And when did the ice cream happen?
Oh, when did the Nancy Pelosi thing?
That was recently, right? Or was it 20 years? Was it 20 years ago?
Exactly.
Okay, I'm just making sure, because your analogies absolutely right. Look, man, if you're going to talk about Trump and his racism, you need to make sure that you never said anything misogynistic 20 years ago.
Yeah, that's such a good point, dude. Like, yes, absolutely. Like, what the hell do you mean? Like, this is 3 months ago versus 2 months ago versus 20 years ago.
The worst hot take.
Yeah,
the coldest hot take.
Exactly. No pun intended. Ice cream, cold.
I
went there, y'all. And so, yeah, please, I'm expecting, if you guys, please, if you have any thoughts on this, comments, please share. We do love to hear what you have to say on this.
Absolutely. We're gonna, eventually, when this video hits YouTube, definitely that might be a little bit easier for the commenting than on Twitch, understandably.
Yeah.
So if you're not watching along live, definitely leave your thoughts in on YouTube. We're more than happy to, answer any questions or debate any points you may have. If you feel like we missed the mark, tell us why. Like this is a really collaborative thing. You might educate us on something. You might give us a different perspective where we do move on this issue.
Yeah,
So,
and I know for sure. I'm pretty sure I'm gonna have. I'm pretty sure my take on this will be considered somewhat controversial, and I think we are in agreement on. I think almost completely here. But I won't put words in your mouth or anything like that. But so I think we have a fairly controversial take on this. So please, by all means, if you disagree, let us know in the comments, and we'll definitely we read every single comment, and we'll get back to you, and we'll respond to as many of them as we can. If we can't get to them all, we probably can get to them all right now. So Thanatos Tammy is in the chat and says, "Hi, babies." I think she's talking to me, not both of us, but maybe we're both her babies.
I'm about to have a baby. We're all babies in our own way.
Maybe she meant to say boys, but I don't know. You let us know. I don't know how to say that name either. So you really gotta you gotta come up with a different screen name for me, because I can't. It's not. I want to say Thanatos every time, but that sounds like both like Theranos, that company that did that really scammy shit.
Yeah. And Thanos.
Thanos.
No,
Yeah.
Yeah, nice.
Oh, no, both. Okay, nice. Awesome. Yes. Both are babies. So
yeah, I mean it is definitely it is controversial, but again, I feel like it's only controversial if you're not consistent in your logic and your narrative as far as investigating.
yeah.
It's only controversial if you think believe women means literally believe 100% of the time without any due diligence. It just means not to brush aside the allegations and to look at all of it and to make the assessment after you do that.
Yep, which I think is like the right wing mischaracterization of the left wing position, is like as if we want to as if we're saying believe women, just across the board, as if there aren't women, like there aren't bad women in this world, like Gina Haspel, who's the fucking, head of the CIA, who was torturing people and lied about it. I'm not going to believe that woman, like nothing that woman does. I'm not going to believe that damn woman, like nothing she says or does. I'm not going to believe that woman. So no, it's not just a blanket statement, believe all women. Of course, it's like, it's don't just like outright disparage and like react reflexively, like not believe women, and disparage them and attack them when they come out with an accusation. For one, give their accusations the respect they deserve and the attention that they deserve, and actually like look into them. Everyone deserves to have their stuff looked into fairly, and then depending on what those investigations uncover, like if it's credible, then we have to have, based on certain degrees of like how do we react to, if it's things like rape, well then fuck you, you're beyond the pale to me. If it's things like and I say beyond the pale, but I don't mean that like you don't get any redemption in society. You don't get to somehow redeem yourself and come back later. You just don't get to have power over people, especially in particular women, ever again in your freaking life. Like you exactly. Give up that ability when you rape somebody, or so like there's certain things where it's like, no, I draw the line, like there's no, but then there's like there are degrees, and there are varying degrees, and we have to have an understanding. And there's also like the big question for me is what have you done since your transgressions, really, or alleged transgressions, and really, have you actively worked to try to empower the people you formerly like did damage to in the communities you damaged? Like, have you reconciled in those
What does your
communities?
restorative justice look like? This is the thing that always drives me crazy when they talk about people with their past histories and whatnot. Like, because I remember when Clinton was running for office, they often talked about her mentor and how she was a white supremacist because she had pictures with Robert Byrd, who was a literal uh, uh, who was a literal white supremacist decades ago. And then he denounced his life. And then he worked with the NAACP and other organizations to make good. And when people bring that up to smear people who have any interactions with him, they never talk about that. And that's an important thing. Which we will probably touch on cancel culture again later in another video, but that's always been my huge thing with regards to that is like it's only permanent as long as you don't make good, right? We have to have a path back to society for people who are willing to make good, to try and do whatever they need to make right with the victims and
Yeah,
to seek restorative justice. There is always a way to get a seat back at the table, depending on what it is, as
yeah,
long as you're willing to work for it. And you have to apologize as loud as your sin was, is
yeah,
what it will always come back to, which is
yeah,
another like key thing. Like if it was a major thing, like it may not be something that you can fix in a day or a year. You may have to work at it for years to step back there, but that path should be there.
yeah, yeah. Absolutely, absolutely. And it's got to be like, you get to come back into society given enough time and enough work and growth, and like you said, restorative justice. Then you get to re-enter society in a way that you've paid for your past mistakes, and you should be able to still lead some dignified life. And so, like, absolutely, there has to be a path to
And
that
and that was the
on the
thing.
left.
That was the thing. That's the thing that irks me about the Robert Byrd thing is because, like I said, the NAACP doesn't represent. We're not black people on a monolith. Obviously, they don't represent. That's not like they can't just be like, "Cool, you good." So, like, if there are black people who have a problem with dude, I will never tell someone you can't feel some type of way to someone who's a reformed racist. If you want to hold that, you can hold that, and that's your prerogative. But you can't people can't because it's just fake. It's performatively being mad at him. You don't actually care because we have an actual white supremacist in office, and you don't speak about that, but you speak about someone who used to be and reformed. It just doesn't make
Yeah,
sense. It's how are you mad on our behalf? Fake. It's the same thing with Michael Vick with the situation with the dogs. They say all of that, but then you have animal rights activists who come out and say, no, he's been working with us to make right for what he's did. He's been out
yeah,
there shutting down dog fighting and making sure kids aren't falling into the trap in poor neighborhoods that led him to do what he did.
yeah,
And they completely disregard that. So it's like, again, like, and these are the same people who talk about all talk who are pro prisons, but don't acknowledge, like, all right, how are you pro prison and rehabilitation? But when people actually try to rehabilitate, you don't. Well, you're like, all right, cool, you can rehabilitate, but you're still a pariah once you've made good, once you've done the work. You can dedicate 10 years of your life to doing the work, but you're still a pariah. So then just call it what it is. It's punishment for punishment's sake. You don't actually care about rehabilitation.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. And we're the folks that talk about on the left, like, you know, not, like restoring like voting rights to felons, and even, violent felons, and like, and I'm one of those people that doesn't believe that anybody should lose their right to vote. I just think that
No.
you whatever the case is, even if you're in prison for a violent crime, I believe you should still have the right to vote, because I think that, one, I don't think there's going to be some sort of like election swung on the like, murderer vote in any district or anything like that. But it's like, um you got, it just teaches people that you're still a part of the society, and it doesn't dehumanize them. And I think that it's, if we say that, democracy is a human right, then you gotta continue to give it to people. Just like housing is a human right, healthcare is a human right. Like these things, that means that even prisoners deserve those things. So it's like that they're human, so they deserve it. So like,
we have some good points here too that I just don't want to miss from the chat. Saying, I think disagreeing doesn't necessarily mean actively against either. So it's only controversial if people are against your decision, but others will also be understanding or neutral about your decision while still disagreeing. No, I don't. I don't think that was unclear, or your words. And your follow up point is one that I really definitely want to hit. I don't know if you guys discussed or brought up how Angela Davis is voting Biden, and how in 2016 she voted for Hillary, and how that doesn't or shouldn't undermine her work and ideology. People got different strategies. The left isn't a monolith, of course, and that's another key thing that we'll all. I personally don't want to vote for Joe Biden. That's just not where I'm at with my voting. And there are some people who are blue or nothing at all, vote blue no matter what. People that I have some disagreements with, and I would, maybe have something to say to, some debate towards, whatever. I could never in my life fix my lips to say a damn thing to Angela Davis about anything.
Yeah.
All right. Like, what do I look like saying her political strategy is bad? What? She educated the people who educated me.
Yeah.
So that just goes to show, which is why I really love that point that you just brought up. It really goes to show that we can disagree on how we get there while still fighting for the same things, and that is the key thing. So thank you for that point.
Yeah, and it also is a point that, like, we have to have strategy on the left, and we have to think. And that was another point that I kind of wanted to make too, was that, like, we gotta. I do think that there are strategic votes, and I do think you sometimes can vote strategically. I do not believe this is a lesser of two evils situation, because I do not think that Shahid Buttar is an evil. I mean, if more information comes out and there is some terrible stuff, then yes, he will be an evil. And then and depending on the situation, I mean, because that's the thing. It's like, what do we do? People are, people suck. Let's be real. A lot of people, like people, as the world is currently constituted. Not that people just inherently suck. Michael Brooks would say, like I love people. I don't like people, but I love people. And it's like I love people, but I don't like people all the time. Like, we do really shitty things to each other, and we act really shitty towards each other. And so, I think that, like, we have to recognize that, like, we need strategy, right? And if we're trying to win, if our goal is to win, we have to work with a strategy. And here we just have to look at, with Joe Biden, my strategy is, and this is why I don't, okay, because with Joe Biden, with the Tara Reade stuff, so a few things that I think are the key differences with Joe Biden versus, and let me just quickly.
Also, hold on. I need to interject, because you had said this earlier and I didn't speak on this, because they had said something about, like, with the Joe Biden, as far as credibility and people having a history or a pattern of behaviors. And when they said that whole thing about Joe Biden doesn't have that. Fam, we have eyes. We have ears. I can see this man massaging shoulders all the time of little girls.
And, like,
all the time, like, smelling hair. There's no. I cannot think of any point
right now.
I need to, like, I know certain things have changed as we've evolved, and we've understood certain things to not be as, like, not problematic. I challenge you to find me a time back in the 50s or 60s where, outside of the reason being misogyny was just allowed back then, anytime where it was socially acceptable to smell someone's hair.
Yeah, exactly. Like, like just
What? Becca's my wife. I don't walk up behind her and just smell her hair without asking.
yeah,
It's weird. It is weird, and it's weird to do it like that. I'm not one to kink shame, but if that is your kink, then it's not appropriate to do it while you're on a podium after an interview.
yeah,
What's wrong with you?
yeah.
Sorry, get back to you. I just had
No,
to
no, no,
again. I'm just
no,
like, how
absolutely.
do we not
Like,
take into context? Like, fam, we see you. You are a grown man. You're not invisible. You can't close your eyes and act like we don't see you. We see you. You creepy. Way too handsy. Way before even I really started researching more into Joe Biden. When I really turned a corner, back when I was a little more politically ignorant and just sharing my cool Uncle Joe sticking it to the man memes back in the day. Even then, when I saw those pictures, it still gave me pause of, yeah, he's real handsy there, like
yeah,
real handsy.
there's articles like back from like before this election cycle that talk about Joe Biden and his like inappropriate touching. Um, let's see if I can pull up one.
It's just been a forever thing for your boy.
I mean, there's so many new ones, so it's hard to like find the.
And we have another one from the chat. We already got rapists and abusers in high political positions, so I don't know why incarcerated people or formerly incarcerated people can't vote. And that's real. We got rapists, we got murderers, we got people who
Yeah, yeah.
like people who've literally done these things, and they make policy. So why would someone who's actually did the time and worked to rehabilitate, did the time and their debt to society, they can't vote, but people who've escaped it and never seen any type of accountability can make policy?
Yeah, that's wild. That's wild.
Really good point.
Yeah, great point. Real quick, I just want to let you know the title on the Twitch video is still like something about Xbox Showcase, so you might want to go to the Twitch stream manager and just fix the title so that it's
Oh,
yeah, just something more
that
accurate.
is very odd.
Yeah. So yeah, just getting back into that, like Biden, the stuff, some of the stuff that is clearly different with the Biden situation is that again, Shahid, we mentioned this earlier. Shahid came right out, immediately addressed the situation, uh, while Joe Biden let that thing sit out there for months, just completely ignoring Tara Reid and trying to pretend like she was nobody. He even said things like he doesn't remember her. It's not like Shahid said anything disparaging or anything like that about this accuser. He's also said he's done nothing to sort of like behind the scenes or publicly try to like suppress these people from speaking out. Like he clearly is trying to still empower these people who are disparaging him to speak, to be heard. He removed he let them out of their non-disparagement agreements because clearly that's not what that was about to him. It wasn't for some reason of like you know hiding misogyny and sexual harassment on his campaign or anything like that. And then also the history, right? We see the history. We had Tara Reid when she came out, like immediately her story had some areas where it could be corroborated, and it was by many people who knew her at the time, contemporaneously saying, "Yeah, she told us about this." Multiple people that came on was like, "Yeah, no, she told us about this." And then she mentioned that her mother had called into Larry King Live and talked about this thing. And then, lo and behold, somebody finds a clip of her mother calling in to Larry King Live and talking about this back in like 1993, months after this thing would have happened. And like, that is all corroborating evidence to me of like this was contemporaneously a big enough issue and a serious enough issue. It was also a rape allegation based on the Department of Justice definition of rape. If you would like, again, and Kwame could pull that up or whatever. If you do DOJ, rape definition, I'm sure you'll find it where it says, any, I just pulled it up. OPA, Department of Justice, an updated definition of rape. In an updated definition of rape, this is on www.justice.gov, the Office of Public Affairs for the Department of Justice. The penetration, no matter how slight, of the vagina or anus with any body part or object, or oral penetration by a sex organ of another person without the consent of the victim. So there you go. So that's right. They said the penetration, no matter how slight, of the vagina or anus with any body part. He stuck his fingers into her vagina, without consent. That is rape. So the dude, he is accused of rape, not sexual assault, rape, by the Department of Justice that he would be, have the power over. This dude, was accused of that, and so that's the allegation we're dealing with. And now we have a history. We have decades now of watching this dude touch women and little girls inappropriately, and then so all the stories were out there. This wasn't new, and we also have a former, a woman who was Lucy Flores, who had come out, and the whole reason that Tara Reid even came out was because Lucy Flores had already come out, and she was a politician from Nevada who was at a campaign event, and then Joe Biden just walks up behind her, like you were saying, and just puts his hands on the back of her shoulders and starts sniffing her hair, and kissed her on the back of her head. This woman who does not know this dude, like that, gave no consent to do anything like that, and doesn't know this dude like that, and he felt comfortable touching like that. This seems to me like a dude who doesn't know boundaries, doesn't know physical boundaries, doesn't respect physical boundaries with people. And so that's all on record. And then also on top of all of that, this dude's policies are total shit and are destructive to women. Like, the dude has supported the Hyde Amendment, which made it so that you couldn't get funding if they prevented any clinic, I believe, that performed abortions from receiving federal funding. Is that the Hyde Amendment?
I believe that one is, yeah.
Yeah. So in U.S. politics, the Hyde Amendment is a legislative provision barring the use of federal funds to pay for abortion, except to save the life of the woman, or if the pregnancy arises from incest or rape. Before the Hyde Amendment took effect, an estimated 300,000 abortions were performed annually. Okay, yeah. So using taxpayer funds. Okay, so before that, 300,000 women were able to get help getting these abortions that, for whatever reason they choose to have. They chose that they wanted to have that. And so before this, the 300,000 women a year, apparently, annually, were helped, and then that got turned to zero, apparently, just with the snap of a finger. And Joe Biden was a huge supporter of this Hyde Amendment. So this dude he also does not support Medicare for all, which will disproportionately impact women, and particularly women of color. So the dude has abysmal policies that actually damage women, and then on top of that, he's abusive to women, and he seems like a sexual predator. So yeah, that all adds up to me to spell somebody that I'm going to adamantly work against. And so I don't see this as the same with Shahid Buttar, because there's no pattern here, there's no history. He's not advocating any policies that seem destructive to women, and he's also been very open and forward and receptive of an investigation and all that sort of stuff. So I don't see this draws more parallels to me of the whole Bernie Sanders is a secret sexist thing. The accusation from Elizabeth Warren feels a lot more like that, where a person, this person, you've watched them. And in fact, I think I found a tweet actually from, I think it was from, I found it. Let me see if I got this still. Nah, I don't got it anymore. All right, I pulled up a tweet from
who is it by?
Elizabeth Croydon. And it was a tweet about, oh, she tweeted this on April 18th, 2020. So April 18th, 2020, she tweeted out, the American media, I'll send you a link to this if you want, if you need to pull it
Yeah.
up. Um,
Thanks for bearing with us, y'all.
yeah, sorry about that, y'all. Just
Still
so it's in the private chat for the Twitch chat. So
just like that. Got it.
that is a tweet from Elizabeth Crichton, the accuser, Shahid Buttar's accuser, on April 18th. And what she said here was, let me know when it's up.
Grabbing it right now.
Please bear with us. Thank you so much for being here, folks. We really appreciate you. You could be anywhere in the world, but you're here with us, and we appreciate that.
I do apologize.
No worries. So I guess I'll try to keep talking while Focus pulls that up. So I just see, okay, so there you go. So this was Elizabeth Croydon, Shahid Buttar's accuser, tweeting on April 18, 2020, and she tweets, the American media demonized a man with no assault allegations against him, with very solid plans to reshape an economy to work for everyone, and referred to him and his supporters as Nazis after he lost his family in the Holocaust. Think about that. But just highlighting that first point and the potential hypocrisy here of saying the American media demonized a man with no assault out. She's referring to Bernie Sanders here, clearly, about the secret sexist accusations. And she says the American media demonized a man with no assault allegations against him, with very solid plans to reshape an economy to work for everyone. So at worst, I'm doing exactly what she did before to Elizabeth Warren in doubting her, and in doubting her thing, because you let somebody's credibility try to speak for itself. And so far, everything that I've seen presented from Shahid Buttar so far has been that of an upstanding leftist who fights for issues of human beings everywhere, but has been stood out on issues of women's rights in the past. And so, yeah, I just think that that's very interesting,
especially when because I can't help but feel like how this kind of compares to the Brett Kavanaugh thing. But when you look at what Shahid's done differently and what he advocates for, especially now, and what Brett Kavanaugh's done and what he advocates for now, it paints an entirely different picture, especially of the way he reacted, he handled it. That all tells me a man who did exactly what he was accused of.
Yes.
I could say that emphatically. And if you don't see any difference between the two, then it may be, I don't know. I don't want to say that there is some form of biases there, but per usual, I do feel like things are very much handled differently, especially when the accuser is a man of color, black or brown. The accused is a man of color, black or brown.
Especially when the accuser,
when the allegation, when it's a white woman, especially with an allegation like this. When you look at all of the blowback that happened from things like, well, you don't have a movie like Song of the South, that programs and codes things to black men's aggression and thirst and brown men's thirst for white women, and then not have it have long-standing impacts going forward, especially of how our perception is colored in certain situations when the accuser and the accused are in those roles and in those situations. Again, it's all stuff that Like, we cannot act like all of this exists in a void and isn't context to what we're talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, and this is very early. This is our, this is our initial thoughts, and it's just to come and stake out the position and make it clear that we try to build a set of principles that we can apply in these situations so that you're not reacting and doing damage. And I think, Humanist Report tweeted out, and his take I thought was a fair take, and essentially he was just saying that, he's reserving his judgment right now because it's very early, and he wants to he doesn't want to do damage to the campaign by, responding too quickly to this sort of thing. Let the facts roll in. And so I think that at the very least, that's what folks should be doing if they're trying to be cautious, is let more facts roll in here. But to immediately for folks to start to remove endorsements and rescind endorsements, I think that that's the wrong move for sure. And that we on the left just have to be better about not, cannibalizing ourselves. Yeah, by doing sort of.
And if we're going to do this stuff, at least research and make sure we're doing it for the right reason.
Yes.
At the very least,
like, people don't deserve to, that's really damaging, and that's us using collective power to do a lot of damage to an individual, and we should be really careful about that, because we're the same people that talk about, power and power being used against an individual, and collective power is power, and we should recognize that on the left, and we have collective power, and that can be wielded for good, it can also be wielded for bad, and so we should be very, very careful, and also knowing, what are we doing here? What are we fighting for? And this person is a champion of the left right now, and so they deserve at least a fair, investigation to be done, because of what he's done is at least earned him a fair investigation into all this, and he's called for that and been totally open to that, and that's the least that we can give somebody without turning inwards against each other and trying to say, like, oh, this guy's trash or whatever the case is. He's like, this just doesn't pass the smell test to me on face value, and so I just want to give some more time for stuff to roll in. And in the meantime, I am still a Shahid Buttar supporter. I will still be. This honestly is going to make me pick up the phone and do some volunteer calls for him, because I just have to offset the damage that some on the left are going to be doing by, especially, I think, the guilt-ridden white liberals are going to be out there with their white guilt, acting and we got to be super careful here and not do damage on the left. And I can say without a doubt, if Jamal Bowman just beat Elliot Engel in New York, Nancy Pelosi, what this says to me is that Nancy Pelosi is scared right now. Shahid Buttar has Nancy Pelosi afraid, because this it just reeks of hit piece, and it reeks of, them pulling strings to make sure these things get elevated up in a certain way. In these people are heard in the mainstream media, and that's how it always works, right? Is this in favor of an establishment pro-corporate candidate? Okay, well, then they're going to get all the good treatment in the media. Is it is this about a left-wing progressive candidate? Okay, they're going to be treated like, monsters. If some of the stuff that came out about Biden ever came out about Bernie Sanders, that dude's campaign would have been dead in the water before it ever started. Dude couldn't have came in and been what Biden was, but because Biden is toes the corporate line and will do everything that corporations say, in those same corporations buy up all the advertising at all the media stations, they have a financial interest in not upsetting those corporations, and so they end up hiding the ball on these stories or whatever, or just stifling these stories and suppressing these stories, and only highlighting them when they're when the accusations are against leftists or left-wing candidates. Most people don't even know about Kamala Harris's campaign manager that was accused of sexual assault, I believe, at least sexual harassment, but I think maybe sexual assault, and had to leave the campaign in disgrace. And but nobody was talking about that at the time, but they were all bringing up Bernie's shit about Bernie's campaign. So yeah, I'm trying to be consistent. I want to be consistent on this, and I do think that our values allow us to be consistent on this and continue to support Shahid Buttar right now, at least until something more comes out that gives us reason to believe
Do
otherwise.
otherwise. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's the way that you always have to approach it. Believe what you believe until evidence comes out to tell you otherwise.
Yeah, absolutely. And it doesn't mean like I need like video evidence or like
Yeah.
no, you give me enough people that seem to be credible, talked about some of this stuff contemporaneously. I don't expect them to come out in the moment and talk about this thing, but like and and then and it looks like there's some sort of pattern of sexual harassment established, and then there's an issue there, but like what we're talking about is one instance of somebody who's been accused of making false accusations in the past, coming out and making an accusation against Shahid Buttar, and then a bunch of people piling on at that very moment about uh, conflating that issue of sexual harassment with
Mm.
mistreatment of workers, maybe being disrespectful to workers or like not allowing them to be heard. These were essentially conflating like microaggressions, like what were like sexist microaggressions in the workplace, to conflating that with like accusations of like sexual harassment. And maybe even it rises to sexual assault with the brushing against the breast thing. Like that would be almost assault. Like
Yeah.
that's like borderline assault right there. And so like that's a heavier accusation. You can't mix those things up or whatever. But in these stories and stuff, they seem to be getting conflated, and they're really trying to pile on with Shahid Buttar. I think right now because his campaign is gaining so much steam, getting so much traction, and the establishment Democrats are afraid because they know what would happen if you unseat Pelosi. It's not like Shahid Buttar becomes the Speaker of the House, no, but it's like what AOC did to Joe Crowley, what Jamal Bowman was to Elliot Engel. That is, I mean, this is bigger than all of those. This would be the biggest of all of those. This would be bigger than AOC because Nancy Pelosi is the number 1 Democrat. Joe Crowley was the number 4 Democrat, and that was considered massive. And he was the number 4 guy. So this would be huge if she lost her campaign, and she claims that she's going to retire in a couple of years, but let me tell you, she's going to retire and she's going to give pass the baton to somebody else that will come and be some neoliberal that if she has power still, and when she's on her way out, she's going to likely be able, her endorsement's going to matter. So you really got to defeat her straight up, or you're going to have to fight to defeat her, whoever she crowns as the next king or queen of San Francisco. And so yeah, I think that just got to be aware of that. And yeah, I think that that's I think that we covered that pretty well. And yeah, I think we'll dig into the, cancel culture more in another video and really get going on that. But I like where this was at. I think that this was, we did
solid
for this. Well, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, thank you guys for tuning in. Again, feel free to definitely let us know your thoughts, your opinions in the comments. And we definitely appreciate any feedback you have, whether it be on the subject we've had, our format, other things you want to see us talk about. We're really here for y'all. So definitely send that our way, and make sure that you do follow us. I'm going to throw up on screen where you can follow us. As of right now, you can hit us out at hit Kamali up at AkiJam on Twitch, or find his channel Radical Democracy on YouTube. You can also find me, Focus Money on Twitch, Focus Money on YouTube, and of course, coming soon, you'll be able to find us on our Raised Fist Media website and YouTube as well. Thank you for tuning in.